Nero Wolfe and the Blind Witness. Underestimating the blind witness who heard too much. Chapter 1, The Unexpected Client. If you've ever spent a Wednesday afternoon at Nero Wolfe's brownstone, you know it's not the time to drop by expecting excitement. Wolfe is in the plant rooms from 4 to 6, giving his orchids more affection than he gives most of the human race, and I'm usually at my desk deciding whether the male demands attention, avoidance, or incineration. It was 3:15, dull as dishwater, and I had just finished reading a letter from a man who wanted Wolfe to find his missing iguana. I filed that one under Archie might have nightmares, when the doorbell rang. The ring wasn't the usual, "I'm suspicious of this neighborhood, tap or the police's, we know you're in there, Goodwin, jab." This one was hesitant. A searching ring, like the finger wasn't entirely sure it had found the button but was too polite to complain about it. I opened the door. The woman standing on the stoop was small, trim, and looked like she'd walked a long way without liking any of it. Her navy coat was good but not new. Her dark hair was pinned into a neat bun that had given up being neat about 2 subway rides ago. One hand gripped a leather purse worn along the edges. The other held a straight white cane. Her eyes were a cloudy gray that didn't settle on me, or the street, or anything. They were turned slightly upward, fixed in the direction of my shoulder but not quite on it. That did the arithmetic fast enough, she was blind. "Is this," she swallowed. "Is this Mr. Nero Wolfe's residence?" I told her it was and that Wolfe was currently communing with his orchids, but I could offer the next best thing, me. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Wolfe," she said. Her voice wasn't timid, exactly, just tight, coiled the way a violin string gets right before it snaps. "Well," I said, stepping aside, "he prefers his clients cited, solvent, and boring, but I can try to get him to make an exception. Come on in." She used the cane like she knew exactly what she was doing, tapping once to find the doorframe, then gliding in with the lightest brush against the floor. I guided her into the office and settled her in the red leather chair most clients sink into like it's quicksand. She perched on the edge instead, taut and wired. "Your name?" I asked. "Miss Eleanor Vance." Her hands were shaking. She noticed me noticing and clamped them together so tightly her knuckles creaked. "Miss Vance," I said, "you don't have to be nervous. Wolfe only bites when someone mispronounces Catliamasii. I'll fetch him." Which was bravado, because coaxing Wolfe downstairs during orchid hours is a job for bribery, blackmail, or the fire department. But there was something about her, not the eyes, not the cane, something buzzing under her skin. Urgency. I went to the door of the plant rooms and called up the stairs. "Boss." "Client." His voice floated back like a grumbling foghorn. "Confound it, Archie. Not now." "She's blind," I said. "And scared." A beat. A longer beat. Then, "Pfui. Bring her tea. I will be down." When Wolfe came down 5 minutes later, he filled the doorway like a disgruntled blimp. He looked at her the way he looks at new orchids, evaluating structure, symmetry, and the likelihood they would annoy him. "Miss Vance," he said, lowering himself into the big yellow chair, "state your business." She inhaled like she'd been underwater. "Mr. Wolfe. I witnessed a murder." That got Wolfe's eyebrows up a 1/4 inch. A big reaction for him. I stayed leaning on my desk, arms folded, pretending my pulse hadn't kicked twice. Miss Vance continued, "It happened Monday night. My employer, Mr. Horace Halton, he was killed in his study. The police believe it was the butler. They arrested him yesterday." "And you," Wolfe asked, "saw the killing?" "I heard it." Wolfe shifted. "Miss Vance. Your condition. Blindness isn't deafness." She straightened, and there was iron in it. "I know what I heard. And I know the man who's been arrested is innocent." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Explain." I was in the hallway outside Mr. Halton's study around 9:30. I had gone to bring him coffee. I heard him arguing with someone, a man. A stranger. The voice was harsh, tight. Not the butlers, not anyone who worked in the house. Her breath trembled. Then there was a crash. A scuffle. And a sound, a very distinct sound. Metal. A click. Like something snapping shut. I made a note. Wolfe didn't blink. And then, he prompted. Then silence. And footsteps. Heavy, fast, retreating. They didn't match the butler's gait. James walks with a drag on the left foot. This was different. Then the side door opening. I know that squeak. He fled that way. And you told all this to the police? Yes. They said, her throat tightened. They said I imagined it or misinterpreted it. That I couldn't really know what I heard. Wolfe's nostrils flared, which, for him, is practically a punch to the table. I came here, Miss Vance said, because someone told me Mr. Wolfe listens. That, Wolfe murmured, is an overstatement. He aimed a look at me. Archie, details. I started asking questions, her employment, the household staff, who might have visited that night. She answered with precision that made me feel like a clumsy drummer. Footsteps, fabrics brushing, cologne traces, the faint echo of the side door hinge. She described the layout of the Halton house so perfectly I could have drawn it. She wasn't imagining anything. She had ears that worked like radar. When she finished, Wolfe sat completely still. That's how you know he's thinking hard, he stops moving entirely. Finally he said, why do you believe the police dismissed your testimony? Her lips tightened. Because it's easier to believe a blind woman is confused than to admit the real killer is still free. That hit the air like a slap. Wolfe sighed. A deep, tectonic sigh. Miss Vance, I will interview you further tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. Archie will drive you home. He levered himself up. I accept the case. Her relief was quiet but enormous. When I opened the front door to escort her out, she paused. Mr. Goodwin, please tell Mr. Wolfe. But she stopped. Thought better of it. Shook her head. Outside, the wind had teeth. She held the railing while I guided her down the steps. Miss Vance, I said, we'll get to the bottom of it. She turned her face toward me, not looking, but listening with everything she had. I hope so, she whispered. Before he comes for me. I froze. Who? She gripped her cane so hard her knuckles whitened. The man I heard in Mr. Halton's study. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He knows I was there. And just like that, Wednesday afternoon at the brownstone got a lot more interesting. Chapter 2, The Impossible Testimony. If you ever want to see a man try to pretend he isn't fascinated while being absolutely fascinated, observe Nero Wolfe at 11 o'clock in the morning with a mystery on the table and a blind woman in the red leather chair. It's a better show than half the theaters on Broadway, and cheaper besides. Miss Eleanor Vance returned exactly on time, escorted by me from the curb because midtown traffic apparently woke up crankier than usual. She walked with the same quiet precision as the day before, using her cane to tap the edge of the carpet like she was reading a secret alphabet on the floorboards. I guided her into the office, and she sat straight-backed, a posture no chair had ever seen fit to inspire in me. Wolfe lowered himself into his oversized throne with a grunt that meant he had settled all philosophical arguments with gravity for the day. The room smelled faintly of orchids, thanks to the double doors being left open on his way down. The scent of the oncidiums always made me think of tropical fruit having a nervous breakdown. Miss Vance, Wolfe said, folding his hands like a magistrate about to sentence a meal, you will give your account again. From the beginning. Without embroidery. Archie will record it. She inclined her head. Yes, Mr. Wolfe. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that has to be wrapped tightly around fear so it doesn't spill onto the carpet. I pulled out my notebook and pencil. All right. Monday night. 9:30. Start there. She inhaled, steadying herself. I was carrying a tray of coffee to Mr. Holton's study. He'd been working late for weeks. Lately he'd been restless. Wolfe interrupted. Why? I don't know. He was a private man. Everyone is private, Wolfe said. Some merely succeed in hiding less. She continued. I reached the hallway outside his study. I heard him speaking loudly, and I realized he was not alone. Describe the voice of his companion, Wolfe said. Male. Mid-40s, maybe 50s. Harsh. Upright posture from the sound of it. I paused my pencil. You can hear posture. She turned her head toward me and smiled faintly. When someone speaks from a slouched position, the voice resonates differently. This voice was forward, tight, as though he were standing very straight. Or very tense. Wolfe nodded once, which for him is like another person doing cartwheels. What were they saying? I asked. Not the words. Just the tone. Angry. Accusatory. Mr. Holton sounded defensive. Could you make out anything specific? Wolfe asked. A phrase. The stranger said, you should have kept your promise. Very sharp. Then Mr. Holton said, it's not what you think. After that, chaos. She took a breath. Something fell. Hard. A book or a lamp, something heavy. Then scuffling. Feet sliding. A grunt of pain. Then. She stopped. Wolfe waited, motionless. A sound, she said finally. A metallic click. Very distinct. Not a gun. Not a knife. Something, shutting. What kind of click? I asked. She thought. Like a small metal clasp locking into place. Very firm. Not loose or worn. I added that to my notes with a mental underline. Wolfe's eyelids had dropped a few millimeters, the equivalent of a gasp in a normal person. What next? Wolfe said. Footsteps. Quick. Heavy. Retreating down the side hallway. Not James's steps, he shifts his weight left because of his hip. These were even. Shoes. I asked. Hard soles. Expensive leather. The stride was confident. But hurried. Direction? Wolfe asked. The side door. It squeaks near the bottom hinge. I heard it. Wolfe drummed a single finger on his armrest. And the butler? He arrived after I screamed, she said. He had been in the pantry. He panicked when he found Mr. Holton. And the police arrested him because... She exhaled. Because he found the body. Because we were alone in the house. Because I'm blind. Wolfe's voice sharpened. Do not ascribe stupidity to blindness, Miss Vance. The police manage well enough without assistance. She nodded again, but her jaw tightened. You said yesterday you know the arrested man is innocent, I said. How? Because the stranger was still in the room when Mr. Holton fell silent, she said. James couldn't have been there. Anne. James loved Mr. Holton like family. He would never. Her voice cracked, barely, like a hairline fracture in glass. Instinct told me she was holding back something. Wolfe's instinct told him the same thing, his head tilted a few degrees, a dangerous sign. Miss Vance, Wolfe said, gentler than expected, is there something you have not told us? She froze. Every part of her. Her fingers tightened around the chair arms. No, she said quickly. Too quickly. Wolfe's nostrils flared. He looked at me. Translation, she's lying. But he didn't press. Not yet. Archie, he said, read back the account. I did. She confirmed every detail, word for word. No wobble. No hesitation. The story was as solid as a concrete pillar. Which made it all the more interesting. Because when I asked, Miss Vance, you sure about the time, she said, 9:30, with the kind of certainty you get from clocks and nerves. But I had already checked the police report that morning. 9:25 was when Halton was heard shouting by the next-door neighbor. A fussy widow with sharper hearing than a subway conductor. 5 minutes might be nothing. Might also be murder. Wolfe saw the discrepancy, I could tell from the slight narrowing of his eyes, but he didn't mention it. Instead he asked, Miss Vance, did Mr. Halton have enemies? Everyone with money has enemies, she said. But I only knew his routine, not his secrets. His routine is often the more important, Wolfe murmured. She hesitated. I can tell you he had been receiving late-night phone calls. At least 3 last week. He spoke quietly during them. And afterward he'd paced the study. 4 hours. I whistled softly. That was new. You didn't tell the police that? I asked. They didn't ask. A little bitterness leaked into her tone. They didn't want details. They wanted a culprit. Wolfe snorted. Confound them. She clutched her cane again. Mr. Wolfe, the man I heard, he was angry. Desperate. I believe he might return. He may think I know more than I do. You know nothing more? Wolfe asked, too casually. She swallowed. Nothing. Another lie. A smaller one. But there. Wolfe let it pass like a fisherman letting the trout swim just a moment longer. Very well, he said. Archie will visit the Halton residence. He will speak with the butler, the staff, the neighbors. And he will acquire the police statements, discreetly. I protested. Discreetly is extra. Wolfe didn't bother replying. Miss Vance stood. Mr. Wolfe, thank you. He lifted a hand. Return tomorrow. 10 o'clock. I led her out. As I helped her down the steps, she said quietly, Mr. Goodwin, do you believe me? Yes, I said. But I don't believe you told us everything. She didn't answer. But her fingers tightened on my arm just enough to confirm it. A cab rumbled up, a battered checker that smelled faintly of onions and Manhattan ambition. I handed her in and watched the door close. As the cab pulled away, Wolfe's voice thundered from the office window upstairs. Archie. Bring me the police report. And milk. My infernal digestion objects to dishonesty. I sighed, buttoned my coat, and headed out into mid-century New York, noisy, cold, full of suspects, and apparently allergic to my free time. If Miss Vance's testimony was impossible, then the man who made it possible was still out there. And somewhere between 9th Avenue and the truth, I intended to find him. Chapter 3, Wolfe takes the bait. If there is one thing Nero Wolfe hates more than malice, deceit, and interruptions during mealtime, it's being intrigued. Intrigue forces him to move, mentally, if not physically. And movement, in Wolfe's dictionary, is a 4-letter word. So when I returned from my morning errands and found Wolfe sitting in his oversized chair, staring at the carpet as if it were insulting him, I knew Miss Eleanor Vance's impossible testimony had begun its slow, inevitable process of chewing on him. You're early, he said, without looking up. You're thinking, I shot back. That's worse. He harumphed. I am digesting. Sure, I said, hanging up my coat. And I'm Ginger Rogers. He ignored that and stabbed a finger at the stack of papers on his side table. The police report. Read aloud. I did, giving the official version in my best deadpan. According to New York's finest, Horace Halton died of blunt force trauma from a fall during an altercation with his butler, James Whittier. No forced entry, no signs of robbery, no evidence of a visitor. The butler's fingerprints were on the fallen lamp, the so-called murder weapon, and Halton's shout was heard around 9:25, drawling from a neighbor while she fed her cat. When I finished, Wolfe's eyelids were at half-mast. That's his "the world is full of idiots and I'm surrounded by evidence" expression. Miss Vance said 9:30, he muttered. Right, I agreed, sprawling into my chair. 5 minutes off. 5 minutes off, Wolfe repeated slowly, is the difference between a fact and a fiction. Or the difference between a wristwatch and accuracy. He glared at me. Wolfe can glare so hard it feels like a brick wall disapproving of your life choices. I want her full narrative again, he said. Boss, she gave it to you twice. She'll start charging per replay. He wagged a thick finger. Her cadence was too precise. Too controlled. She is holding something back. I noticed. But it's something she's scared to say, not something she's hiding for fun. Wolfe grunted. Bah. For him, that was practically agreement. The crime scene. By Wolfe's decree, I headed back out into Manhattan's midday hustle to revisit the Halton residence. The brownstone sat on East 68th, wedged between a dentist's office and a townhouse that looked like it committed tax fraud for sport. A thin sheen of sleet turned the sidewalk into a nice stage for pratfalls, but I maintained my reputation for agility by only slipping twice. James Whittier, the butler, answered the door. His tall, narrow frame looked even thinner under stress. His hair was the color of stale oatmeal. Mr. Goodwin, he breathed, as if oxygen cost money. Have you news? Not yet, I said. But I'm taking a look around. I told the police everything, he murmured. They didn't believe me. Do you? I believe you didn't kill him, I said. But believing things and proving them are two different sports. He blinked, then nodded repeatedly like he'd been waiting for someone to say that exact sentence since his arrest. I wandered through the foyer and then into the study. Chairs overturned, books sprawled across the carpet, and the dent in the side table where something had hit it hard. The police had taken the lamp, but the outline where dust ended and death began was obvious. I knelt to examine the rug. Fibers were pushed in uneven streaks, like two sets of feet had tangled there. James hovered behind me. He was alive when I entered, he murmured. Barely. And the window, open. Someone must have. Window wasn't the exit, I said, straightening. Miss Vance heard the side door. His face crumpled. She told them. They didn't care. I sniffed the air. Something lingered faintly, sharp, metallic, almost medicinal. Wolfe would have caught it in a heartbeat, but I wasn't completely useless. You burn incense? I asked. He shook his head. Mr. Halton disliked all fragrances. Then what's that smell? I don't know. A clue. Or a red herring. With Wolfe cases, you collect both and let him decide which belongs in the stew. The household. I spent the next hour questioning the cook, puffy, nervous, the maid, silent, resentful, and the chauffeur, broad, sweaty, and allergic to honesty. 3 different stories about when they'd last seen Halton, and 2 of the stories contradicted themselves. When I asked about late-night phone calls, all 3 stiffened. The cook said, I heard rumors. The maid said, he took calls behind closed doors. The chauffeur said, I ain't saying nothing that gets me fired. Considering their employer was already past the point of issuing pink slips, that was interesting. The visitor. On my way out, a woman in a mink coat stepped through the front door as if the building were allergic to her absence. Her lipstick was as sharp as a knife blade and twice as red. She smelled like money, powder, and trouble. She eyed me. You're not a detective. Only on weekdays, I said. And weekends. And holidays. She didn't smile. I'm Mrs. Harriet Halton. Who are you? Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. That got a reaction, a flicker in the eyes. Fear. Annoyance. Admiration. Hard to say when someone's face is half makeup and half social climbing. I see, she said. Then you may tell Mr. Wolfe that my husband's affairs are private. Well, given that murder rarely respects privacy. She cut me off with a palm-up gesture. I don't intend to discuss Horace's business with hired help. Hired help has ears, lady, I said. And sometimes brains. She swept past me like a ship cutting through inferior waves. Suspicious? Absolutely. Guilty? Too early to say. But I filed her under, watch her like she's juggling knives. Back to Wolfe. When I returned to the brownstone, the smell of Fritz's braised beef enveloped me with promises I knew Wolfe intended to keep. I found Wolfe at his desk with a beer in hand and an expression indicating the beer had not yet lived up to expectations. Well, he asked. I gave him the rundown. James's innocence noises. The staff acting like a jury of nervous squirrels. The perfume cloud known as Mrs. Halton. Wolfe grunted. And the smell in the study? You noticed that, I said. I notice everything. What did it resemble? Metal. Sterile. Chemical. Pfui. Vagueness. I require specificity. Then bring your own nose next time. He closed his eyes as if praying for patience. It didn't work. Miss Vance, he said, is our fulcrum. Her account is either flawless or deliberately flawed. Both possibilities intrigue me. You think she's lying? I think she is choosing. I frowned. Choosing what? What to disclose, and what to withhold. He sipped his beer. She fears something. Not the killer. Someone else. That's a leap. That is deduction. He locked eyes with me. Archie. Fetch Miss Vance. Bring her here this evening. Tonight? I asked. You never summon a client at night unless the house is burning. He waved a hand. The house is smoldering. Before I could argue, the phone rang. I answered it. A man's voice whispered, rough and low. Tell Wolfe to stop asking questions. This case is closed. Then a click. Not the metallic kind Miss Vance heard. A telephone click. But it still froze my spine. Who was that? Wolfe asked. A friend, I said. The kind you don't invite to parties. Wolfe inhaled slowly, deeply. Archie. Fetch Miss Vance. And that's how I ended up heading back into the Manhattan night, sleet picking at my coat, taxis hissing by, and the scent of orchids drifting down the brownstone hallway behind me. Something in this case was beginning to spark. And Wolfe, damn him, was enjoying it. Chapter 4, Clues in the Dark. There's something about Manhattan at night that makes everything look like it has a secret. Street lamps flicker like they're winking at conspiracies, taxis hiss across wet pavement like they're being chased, and the air carries whispers of perfume, exhaust, and ambition. I was soaking up all that ambience while retrieving Miss Eleanor Vance from her modest apartment on West 57th. She opened the door before I could knock, which told me she'd been standing there, listening for my footfall in the hallway. Mr. Goodwin, she said, steady as a church bell. Miss Vance. Ready for your encore performance at the brownstone? She managed a tiny smile. If Mr. Wolfe insists. Mr. Wolfe always insists, I said. It's his cardio. Inside the cab, she folded her hands neatly in her lap, but I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat from a radiator with grievances. New York streamed by in streaks of neon and shadow. She kept her head angled slightly toward the window, listening to the city as though it were giving testimony. You seem jumpier than last time, I said. She inhaled. Someone called my apartment this afternoon. They didn't speak. They just breathed. Slowly. That's either a killer or someone who should switch dentists. She didn't smile. I made a mental note to tease her less until Wolfe wrung out whatever truth she was clenching. Return to Wolfe. When we arrived, Fritz ushered her into the office with a gentle arm and a mug of chamomile tea that belonged in a magazine spread for World's Coziest Beverage. Wolfe was planted in his yellow chair, hands resting on his middle like twin sentries. The orchids upstairs had probably been briefed that their master was now occupied. Miss Vance, Wolfe said, with a formality that could frost windows, you will repeat your account again. This time, Archie will interrupt with any inquiries I deem necessary. Which means every 5 seconds, I added. Wolfe gave me a glare that could cauterize wounds. Miss Vance began. She told the story again, the hallway, the voices, the crash, the scuffle, the metallic click, the fleeing footsteps, the squeak of the side door. Not one syllable was out of place. She might as well have memorized it from a script. Wolfe listened with closed eyes and pursed lips, the expression he wears when rebuilding a crime scene molecule by molecule. When she finished, I said, same as before. Not even a comma changed. That, Archie, Wolfe said, is the problem. Miss Vance stiffened. I'm telling the truth. Truth is often inconsistent, Wolfe said. Memory is elastic. Yours is not. She set her tea down with a tremble. My account is exact because I rely on my hearing. It's how I survive. That may be so, Wolfe said, but your precision is too absolute. You are reciting, not recalling. The room tightened like a wire pulled taut. Are you accusing me of lying? She whispered. No, Wolfe said softly. I am accusing you of remembering something you have not yet admitted. She froze. I saw it, the tiny flinch. The flicker of panic. A tell. Wolfe leaned forward an inch, a movement so rare it might qualify for the Guinness Book. Miss Vance, what else did you hear? She swallowed hard. Nothing. Wolfe's sigh was massive. Archie. I nodded. Miss Vance, I'm not the one who thinks you're lying. I think you're scared. And I'd like to know of what. Her fingers twisted around each other like vines in a storm. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I heard the visitor say something else. Before the crash. She paused. He said, you had no right. Wolfe's eyebrows ascended 1/2 centimeter. And you omitted this, he said, because. She tugged her coat closer around her. Because it changes things. Because the police would twist it. Because I. A knock at the door cut her off. Archie, Wolfe barked. I opened it. Standing on the stoop was a man built like he'd gone 3 rounds with life and had only enjoyed the first one. Gray coat, collar up against the cold, eyes hard enough to chip marble. I'm Everett Miles, he said, pushing in before I could stop him. I worked for Halton. I heard you're digging where you shouldn't. Oh, wonderful, I said. A visitor without manners. The night is complete. He jabbed a finger at Miss Vance. You stay out of this, Eleanor. Wolfe made a noise like a walrus choking on syllogisms. Goodwin. Remove him. I stepped forward. Miles stepped back. I'll talk, he said quickly, but not to him. He pointed at Wolfe. That, I said, is the worst instinct a man can have. The interloper's story. Miles finally let himself be pushed into a chair opposite Miss Vance, who kept her composure remarkably well considering a man twice her size had just barged in like Thor with indigestion. I looked after Halton's finances, Miles said. He was in trouble. Gambling debts. Business failures. Bad investments. The man was drowning, and dragging all of us with him. "Congratulations," I said, "you've confessed to motive in the first paragraph." He glared at me. "I didn't kill him. But someone was threatening him. Calling him. Meeting him late at night. Halton wouldn't say who." Wolfe's voice was low. "And why come here?" "Because I thought Eleanor would keep her mouth shut," he snapped. "But now she's repeating things to detectives." "She witnessed a murder," Wolfe said icily. "Do not presume to chastise her for seeking justice." Miles's jaw clenched. Miss Vance's chin lifted. "I heard what I heard." "And you didn't hear me," Miles growled. "Because I wasn't there." Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Doubt? I couldn't pin it. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Mr. Miles. The butler insists he had no quarrel with Halton. The staff are evasive. The widow is uncooperative. And now you storm in with warnings and half-truths. Why should I believe your purpose is benign?" Miles shifted in his seat. Sweat formed at his temples despite the cold air. Finally he stood. "Just, stop digging," he muttered. "None of this can end well." And with that, he walked out. When the front door shut, Wolfe released a deep sigh that rattled the curtains. "Archie," he said, "see him off the premises." Which was Wolfe speak for, follow him discreetly, and report everything. The follow. I trailed Miles into the night. Manhattan had flipped the switch from bustling to brooding, and the street lamps glowed like torches guarding secrets. Miles walked fast, shoulders hunched, a man trying to outrun guilt or fear or both. When he ducked into a corner diner, I took a perch at the counter behind him. The place smelled of frying onions, burnt coffee, and desperation, the standard decor for late-night eateries. He ordered a coffee, drank half, and made a phone call from the payphone near the restrooms. I couldn't hear much, but I caught. "They're asking questions." "No, she didn't say it." "Yes, I'm sure, you'd better." That was when he turned, saw me in the payphone reflection, and slammed the receiver down. He left without finishing the coffee. I followed him 3 blocks until he vanished into a private building with a doorman who looked like he could bench press a Buick. No way inside without starting a riot, so I headed home. Back to Wolfe. Wolfe listened to my report with the expression of a man forced to consume mediocre cuisine. "This," he said, "is a tangle. A welter. A mess." "That's New York," I said. "We export it." He ignored me. "Miles knows more than he says. So does Mrs. Halton. And Miss Vance, she has heard something she has not yet shared. Something central." "Yeah," I said. "I noticed." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Tomorrow, we isolate each element. Noise. Time. Motive. Opportunity. One of them will betray the truth." He stood, which meant something serious was brewing, and reached for the globe to pour a brandy. "Archie," he said quietly, "someone is frightened. That makes them unpredictable." "Which one?" I asked. "All of them." I went to shut off the lights. The orchids upstairs exhaled their faint perfume down the stairwell. Outside, the city growled its nighttime challenges. And somewhere out there, the man Miss Vance heard, the man who said, "You had no right," was sweating harder than we were. Tomorrow, Wolfe would tighten the net. And I intended to be holding the rope. Chapter 5, The Trap Laid in Silence. If you ever want to witness something rare, something precious, something that ought to be preserved in a museum under temperature-controlled glass, observe Nero Wolfe when he has decided to work. Not pontificate. Not criticize. Work. The morning after Miles barged into our office and Miss Vance cracked open her emotional vault by a hair, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms at 11 sharp looking like a man who had eaten a problem for breakfast and found it chewy. I had prepared the tactical war room, also known as the office, by placing the phone within reach, brushing crumbs off Wolfe's favorite armchair, from his crumbs, mind you, not mine, and opening a window just enough to clear Fritz's experiments from the air. Wolfe marched, waddled, with purpose. "Archie. Call Inspector Kramer." "Yes, sir," I said. "Shall I tell him you'll be cordial today, or should I warn him in advance that his blood pressure will spike?" He growled. "Just call." Kramer answered on the second ring with his standard charm. "Goodwin, what the hell do you want?" I put it on speaker, not that Wolfe would say speaker in this century, but he insisted on hearing every filthy exhale Kramer produced. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "I am summoning all relevant parties in the Halton matter to my office this afternoon." "You're what?" Kramer exploded. Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes, savoring the outrage. "You heard me. Wolfe, if you interfere. You have already bungled this case," Wolfe said crisply. "Let me attempt to unbungle it." Kramer went silent long enough for me to imagine him biting through a cigar. "Fine," the inspector spat. "But if you obstruct." "I never obstruct," Wolfe said. "I clarify." Kramer slammed the line down. Wolfe smiled like a smug volcano. The guest list from hell. Next came the invitations. "Archie," Wolfe said, "call them in this order: Mrs. Harriet Halton, Everett Miles, the butler Whittier, the household staff, and Miss Vance. Do not tell them why. Merely insist their presence is required." "You're hosting a party," I said. "Should I get streamers? Balloons? Poisoned hors d'oeuvres?" He gave me the patented Wolfe glare. "Pfui. Bring them at 4. And what if they ask why? Tell them Mr. Wolfe has come to a conclusion." I stared at him. "Have you?" "No," he said. "But they don't know that." I grinned. "You're setting a trap." "No," he corrected. "I am creating an environment in which they will trap themselves." The scent of fear. The afternoon arrived dripping cold rain onto the sidewalks and painting Manhattan the color of cigarette ash. By 4 o'clock the brownstone's office was fuller than a late-night subway car. Mrs. Harriet Halton arrived first, draped in mink and disdain. She swept inside and sniffed like we'd invited her to a garage sale. Everett Miles followed, jaw tight, eyes darting. The man was sweating like a politician in confession. The butler James Whittier entered with the humility of a monk and the anxiety of a man who expects lightning to strike indoors. The cook, maid, and chauffeur trickled in, each looking like they'd prefer a firing squad. Lastly came Miss Vance, guided by me. She paused at the doorway to the crowded room. "So many," she whispered. "You'll be fine," I said softly. "Wolfe has the room rigged in his favor." She managed a tiny nod. Wolfe sat like a mountain made of upholstery and certainty. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Your cooperation is appreciated." Mrs. Halton scoffed. "Is this legal?" "No," Wolfe said. "It is necessary." Kramer entered at that moment, stomping, dripping rain, and scowling hard enough to break glass. His eyes darted around the room like he might arrest everyone just to simplify his evening. "Wolfe," he growled. "Start talking." Wolfe ignored him. The orchestrated interrogation. Wolfe raised a hand. "I will speak with each of you. Alone. Archie will escort you in turn. Inspector Kramer will observe. No one leaves until I am finished." That caused a minor riot. Mrs. Halton shrieked something about lawyers, Miles muttered a curse, and the cook whimpered. Miss Vance stood rigid, gripping her cane like it kept her anchored to earth. I guided Mrs. Halton in first. Wolfe didn't bother pretending to be gentle. "Mrs. Halton," he said, "your husband was in financial ruin. Did you know?" Her eyes darted. "Rumors. Rumors you ignored? Or rumors you encouraged?" She stood abruptly. "I will not sit here and be accused." Wolfe snapped, "Sit." She sat. I escorted her out 15 minutes later, flushed and trembling. Next came Miles, who tried to bluff through Wolfe's calm questions and ended up looking like a boy caught stealing lunch money. Then the staff, each contradicting the others, adding bitterness, fear, resentment to the stew. Wolfe watched them like a botanist watching weeds invade a rare bloom. And then, Miss Vance. Wolfe gestured her in with unexpected softness. She sat before him, cane folded across her knees. Miss Vance, Wolfe said quietly, you have heard more than you've said. And you know it. She paled, just a shade, but enough. He continued, your precision, your certainty, your fear, they all suggest that the crime scene is not merely one of sound to you. A tremor passed through her hands. Mr. Wolfe. I told you. You withheld something, Wolfe said bluntly. Something crucial. Her breath hitched. Kramer slammed a hand on the desk. Spit it out, Mississippi. Wolfe glared so savagely that even Kramer shut up. Miss Vance, Wolfe said, leaning forward, voice dropping deep, you are safe here. Her lips parted. I heard the killer speak. Not just the phrases I mentioned. Wolfe nodded. Yes. You know his voice. She froze. Miles, outside the office, heard that through the door and cursed loudly. That was my cue to get up and block him. He pushed past me. You can't listen to her. She's confused. Wolfe growled, Mr. Miles, remove yourself or Archie will remove you. I'd love to, I said, cracking my knuckles. Miles backed off, but barely. The crack in the wall. Miss Vance swallowed, her voice shaking. I know his voice. I recognized it. But I don't know how to explain without making everything worse. Worse for whom? Wolfe asked. For me, she whispered. There it was. The center thread of the tapestry. Wolfe nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Very well. I will not force you. But I will say this, whoever you heard, whoever you recognized, is growing desperate. He will make a mistake very soon. She clutched her cane tighter. Outside, Mrs. Halton's sharp voice broke the tension. Are we done here? I refuse to stay another minute. Wolfe stood, an event that made the entire room go still. We are done for today, he announced. But I will speak again with each of you. Separately. Miles stormed out. Mrs. Halton flounced. The butler trembled his way down the steps. The staff scurried like mice exiting a kitchen at the sight of a broom. Miss Vance lingered, trembling. Mr. Wolfe, she whispered, I want to tell you everything. But not today. Not with them here. Wolfe nodded. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. When she left, silence filled the room like smoke. Kramer glared. Wolfe, you're sitting on something. Out with it. Wolfe folded his arms. I sit on many things, Inspector. None of them concern you tonight. Kramer stormed out. Wolfe sank back into his chair. Archie. Yeah, boss. Someone in that room is about to commit a very foolish act. Follow Miles. And Mrs. Halton. And Whittier. In that order. I grabbed my coat. The case was no longer simmering. It was about to boil. Chapter 6, A Murderer Exposed by a Blind Woman. If you asked me which part of detective work I prefer, I'd say the part where I get to give orders instead of take them. Unfortunately, working for Nero Wolfe doesn't allow that luxury. When he says, follow Miles, you follow Miles. When he says, report, you report. And when he says, don't get yourself killed, that one is optional because Wolfe has always assumed I have enough sense to stay alive just to annoy him. But on the evening after Wolfe's so-called conversation with the Halton Brigade, things were starting to get spicy enough that I would have accepted backup from a small army or, failing that, a waiter carrying a hot stew pot. Miles on the move. Everett Miles left our brownstone as if pursued by debt collectors, which, considering his employer was Horace Hulton, was probably not far from the truth. I tailed him at a comfortable distance, keeping to the shadows and letting Midtown's neon lights do their distracting dance behind me. Miles walked fast, shoulders hunched, muttering to himself. He turned down 61st, ducked into a newsstand, pretended to read a magazine, then shot out again as though realizing he'd only taken literature advice from the same man who'll sell you cigarettes 1 inch shorter than regulation. I kept on him. Finally, he slipped into an alley behind a shuttered shoe repair shop. Very subtle. I edged to the corner and waited. A minute later a man approached. Shorter. Stockier. Hat pulled low. The kind of guy who'd blend into a bowling league photo without anyone remembering buying him a beer. Voices murmured. Miles said something sharp. The short guy responded in a growl I couldn't catch. Then. The sound. A metallic click. Sharp. Precise. Familiar. It was the same kind of click Miss Eleanor Vance had described. Not a gun. Not a knife. Something shutting. Something metal. Miles jerked back. The short man grabbed his coat. I was about to step in when a delivery truck rumbled past, headlights cutting into the alley. The short man released Miles and hurried off. Miles stumbled away in the opposite direction. I followed the short guy, but he slipped into a side entrance of a building guarded by a doorman whose shoulders blocked most bad decisions from occurring inside. Without a pretext stronger than, I'd like to eavesdrop on potential murderers, I couldn't enter. So I pivoted and tailed Miles again, until he flagged a cab and shot off toward the financial district. I sighed. Perfect, I muttered. I need roller skates and a trust fund. The second follow. It was almost 9 by the time I traced Miles to a corner bar just off Wall Street. The kind of place where the lighting suggests the management is ashamed of the decor. He took a booth in the back, ordered a double whiskey, downed it like courage in a glass, and made a phone call at the payphone on the far wall. I drifted close enough to overhear a few gems. She knows, no, not everything. Wolfe is getting too close, yes, I'm trying. He slammed the receiver down and ordered another whiskey. By the third one, I was convinced he'd either confess to murder or pass out. He chose option C, staring blankly into the wood grain of the table while looking like a man waiting for doom to punch him in the stomach. I left him to it. No point interrogating a man who'd melt into the floor if anyone breathed on him too hard. The Wolfe Report. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office wearing his thinking scowl, the one that makes his forehead wrinkle like a bulldog who's just discovered existentialism. Well, he demanded. I told him everything. The alley meeting. The metallic click. The shadowy short man. Miles' shaky whiskey recital. Wolfe listened with his eyes shut, fingers drumming lightly on his armrest, a clue that his mind was spinning faster than a roulette wheel with anxiety issues. The click, Wolfe said finally. Again the click. The same kind? I asked. Archie, he growled, if it were not the same kind, you would have said so. Miss Vance's descriptions are precise. You are occasionally competent. Thanks, I said. I'll put that on a trophy. He ignored me. There is a connection Miss Vance refuses to admit. Something she recognized. Something she fears. Yeah, I said. She reacted like someone stepped on her soul. Wolfe frowned. Bring her here tomorrow at 10. Once more. Boss, she's scared. She's holding something big. Yes, Wolfe said. And she must be persuaded to unhold it. Very delicate phrasing. He glared. Archie. Milk. That meant he was done discussing anything involving emotions or humanity. I brought the milk. The next morning, Miss Vance returns. By 10, the brownstone smelled of orchids, Fritz's fresh-baked bread, and the faint anxiety that always accompanies a breakthrough Wolfe can almost taste. Miss Eleanor Vance arrived bundled inside her gray coat, clutching her cane like a lifeline. She sat in the red leather chair, hands steady but breath uneven. "Miss Vance," Wolfe said, voice like velvet over steel, "it is necessary that you tell us what you have been withholding." She shook her head. "Mr. Wolfe, I can't. It will destroy everything." "Everything?" Wolfe repeated. "That is broad. Define everything." "My life," she whispered. I felt a twinge. Wolfe didn't. "Nonetheless," he said, "you came here." She inhaled. "Yes. Because someone else is in danger. And I cannot allow another man to die." Even Wolfe blinked at that. "Another?" I echoed. She nodded, trembling. "The man who met with Mr. Halton that night. I recognized him. By his voice." I leaned in. "Who?" Her face twisted. "Everett Miles." I shot upright. "Miles?" She shook her head sharply. But it wasn't him in the study. It was his voice. His tone. His phrasing. But the footsteps, they didn't match. The height, the weight, it didn't add up. Wolfe grumbled. "A mimic? Or a recording?" "HM." She continued, voice cracking. "Miles used to read to me. At the Halton home. He'd practice speeches and financial pitches aloud. I knew his cadence. His breathing. But the body behind the voice wasn't him?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "I recognized the voice. But not the man who made it." A cold draft slithered through the room, and not from the window. "That," Wolfe said, sitting forward, "is why the killer is desperate." I nodded slowly. He knows she recognized the voice. But doesn't know how. Or if she's told anyone. Wolfe drummed his fingers. "And now, Archie, we must act." "How fast?" I asked. "Immediately," Wolfe said. "Fetch." A crash at the front door cut him off. Intrusion. I bolted out and found the butler, James Whittier, pale as an empty teacup, clutching the doorframe. "Mr. Goodwin," he gasped. "It's Everett Miles, he's missing." "Missing?" I repeated. "Since when?" "His landlady says he never came home last night. And he left all his things behind." I felt my spine turn into a live wire. Miss Vance appeared in the hallway behind me. "Missing?" she whispered. "No, he can't be." Wolfe thundered from the office, "Archie. Bring them all. Miles vanishes today of all days." I turned to him. "Boss, this is bad." "No," he said, "this is predictable." He jabbed a finger at me. "We must move. Now. Before the next sound we hear is that same metallic click, around Miss Vance's neck." I grabbed my coat. Miss Vance clutched her cane. Wolfe's eyes were blazing with a mix of fury and triumph. The net was tightening. But the spider was still hiding in the dark. Chapter 7, The Dangerous Aftermath. If you've never seen Nero Wolfe go on the defensive, that's because he hates moving in any direction, including backward. But he does understand one basic idea: if you have the only witness to a murder and the murderer is getting jumpy, you don't let the witness wander around Manhattan like a blind duck in hunting season. The morning James showed up panting about Everett Miles being missing, Wolfe listened, grunted, and then turned his head toward me. "Archie. We must secure Miss Vance." I raised my brows. "You mean actually protect the client before she gets killed? That's very progressive of you." Fui. I mean protect the integrity of the evidence she carries in her head. Your sentimentality is revolting. Go get her. Bring her here. And do not dally. Sure, I said. I'll just stroll through a city full of suspects with a bullseye on my back. No problem. He growled, which I took for affectionate encouragement, because I'm an optimist. Night moves. By the time I headed for Miss Vance's place, the city had shifted into its late afternoon sulk, gray light bleeding into neon, taxis honking at nothing in particular, steam rising from grates like the sidewalks were exhaling. Miss Vance lived in a narrow brownstone on West 57th, third floor, no elevator. Whoever picked that for a blind woman had a nasty sense of humor. I rang. Her door opened a crack, then wide. Mr. Goodwin? She asked. That's right, I said. Wolfe wants to upgrade your accommodations. You're being transferred to the finest reluctant sanctuary on West 35th. Her smile was faint but real. He thinks I'm in danger. That makes two of us, I said. Pack what you need for a few days. She didn't take long, a small suitcase, a coat, and a white cane she handled with the ease of long practice. I took the suitcase and we headed for the stairs. Halfway down, she stopped. Someone's here, she whispered. I didn't hear anything yet, but her hearing had put all of us to shame so far. I tightened my grip on her elbow with one hand and went for my hip with the other, pure habit. No gun, Wolfe prefers me unarmed and irritable. On the second floor landing, a shadow detached itself from the wall. Miss Vance, a voice said. Is that you? Low, controlled, masculine. Not Miles. Not James. Someone else. Miss Vance went rigid. Her fingers dug into my arm. No, she breathed. Not to him, about him. Easy, I muttered. Who is it? She didn't answer. Which was an answer, in its way. The shadow moved closer. I could make out a shorter man, compact build, hat brim low. The same outline I'd seen in the alley with Miles, if I wasn't crazy. And if I was at least a consistent lunatic. I heard you were leaving, the man said. I thought we should talk. Alone. Yeah. I said. Well, she brought a chaperone. He stiffened. Goodwin. Accept no substitutes, I said. You got business, say it from there. For a second nothing moved. Then I heard it. Click. Sharp, metallic, definite. It shot straight down my spine. Miss Vance flinched like someone had slapped her. That sound, she choked. It's him. That's the sound. The guy stepped closer, one hand coming up. There was a glint of metal. Small, palm-sized, not a gun. A case of some kind, snapping shut. Whatever its purpose, his next move wasn't subtle. His free hand shot toward Miss Vance's throat. I shoved her back against the wall and stepped in, jamming my shoulder into his chest. We went down the stairs in an undignified knot. He was stronger than he looked and faster than I liked, elbowing me in the ribs and wriggling free halfway to the second landing. By the time I got my breath back and scrambled up, he was bolting down toward the front door. Hey! I barked, and took the steps 3 at a time. I hit the lobby just in time to see the door swing shut and a dark shape dive into the street, then vanish behind a passing truck. I started after him and stopped. Priorities. I swore, turned, and ran back up. Miss Vance was on the landing, one hand on the banister, shaking but upright. Did he hurt you? I asked. She shook her head. No. You stopped him. That sound, Mr. Goodwin, it's the same. Exactly the same. Yeah. I heard it. I took her arm. We're getting you out of here. Now. And he knew your name, she whispered. He knew you. That too, I said. Which puts me in the popular club I didn't want to join. Back to the fortress. We took a cab this time, and I made sure the driver didn't have any friends in the back seat. The city outside was a smear of lights and wet streets. Inside, Miss Vance sat stiff as a board, clutching her cane. "Mr. Goodwin," she said quietly, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. Almost being strangled. "That wasn't on the schedule." "For not telling you sooner," she said. "About everything." I let that sit until we were in our front room, with the warm smell of Fritz's dinner drifting from the kitchen and Wolfe's orchid sending down their expensive perfume like the world's fanciest air freshener. Wolfe was in his chair, of course, a bottle of beer on the table beside him. His eyes went to Miss Vance's throat as we entered. "What happened?" he demanded. I gave him the short version. "Man on the stairs. Voice like our alley friend. Same metallic click. Lunge for the neck, and my heroic intervention." Wolfe's face went darker than his yellow chair. "Confound it," he rumbled. "Here. Sit, Miss Vance. You are certain it was the same sound?" "Yes," she said, sitting on the edge of the red chair. "The same click I heard in Mr. Halton's study, before he fell. And the same one Mr. Goodwin heard in the alley with Mr. Miles." Wolfe nodded once. "It is a device, then," he murmured. "Not incidental." Repeated. "Deliberate." "Great," I said. "So our man packs a little gadget that snaps shut. We still don't know who he is." Wolfe's eyes slid to Miss Vance. "Don't we?" She flinched. Her fingers tightened on the cane. He sighed. "I will not club it out of you, madam. That is Inspector Kramer's métier. But now, for your protection and ours, you must at least explain why you have been so reluctant." She drew a breath, deep, ragged. "Because if I say his name, he becomes real," she whispered. "Not just a voice, not just a sound. I may not have eyes, Mr. Wolfe, but I still see people. In my mind. By their voices, their smells, the way they move. Once I name him, I will see him every time I close my eyes. And he will know." "He already knows," Wolfe said quietly. "He came to your building. He reached for your throat. He is, as you Americans say, all in." She bowed her head. "I was afraid of being wrong," she said. "Of condemning the wrong man. Hearing is all I have. If that betrays me, I have nothing. So I told myself I must be mistaken. I decided to delay." "That," Wolfe said, "is not unreasonable. But it is no longer tenable." He looked at me. "Call Kramer. Tell him someone attempted to assault our client. And tell him that his theory about Whittier grows more asinine by the hour." "That'll go over great," I said. "I'll tell him after dinner. I'd like to eat one more meal before he strangles me." Kramer, reluctant student. Kramer arrived an hour later, bringing his coat, his hat, and his personal climate of cigar smoke and impatience. "You again," he grunted at Miss Vance. "You attract trouble like Wolfe attracts indigestion." "Inspector," Wolfe said, "your gallantry is suffocating." "Sit." Kramer grumbled but obeyed. I reported the stairway incident. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "You're sure you didn't recognize the guy?" "No face, no voice." "Not enough," I said. "Shorter than me, stocky, moves quick. And he knows my name. That describes half the crooks in New York." Miss Vance spoke up, very softly. "It was the same voice as in the study," she said. "Altered, but the same. And the same click." Kramer snorted. "A click. That's your big clue." "You have arrested a man who drags his left foot," Wolfe said, voice going smooth and dangerous. "Our assailant was light-footed. Our witness heard the exit through the side door followed by steps down the alley. But James Whittier was found upstairs, in the kitchen, with no traces of the outside chill, and his shoes dry. The only thing you have on him is opportunity and a lamp. Kramer bristled. Which is enough. No, Wolfe cut in. It isn't. Not anymore. Your real quarry is still at large. He has already tried to silence the only person who can identify him. Kramer glared at me. And you let him get away. You're welcome, I said. But if you'd like me to rewind time, I charge extra. They snarled at each other for another 5 minutes, which I won't record because ink is expensive. In the end, Kramer grudgingly agreed to assign a man outside the brownstone and review Whittier's status. Which meant, in plain English, that for the first time he was considering the possibility that Wolfe had been right all along. It must have hurt. Why she hid it. After Kramer left, the house got quieter. Fritz clattered in the kitchen. The orchids exhaled up on the roof. The city outside hummed its usual nocturne. Miss Vance sat, hands still clenched. Miss Vance, Wolfe said more gently than I'd heard in weeks, you said you feared being wrong. Is that all? She turned her face toward his voice. When you're blind, Mr. Wolfe, she said, people lie to you more. They think you won't notice. They change their voices, their footsteps, their sense. Once, as a child, I accused the wrong man of something. I trusted the sound of his shoes on the floor. I was wrong. I never forgot how he sounded when they said I'd lied. She shivered. I promised myself I would never name a man unless I was absolutely sure. With Mr. Halton, that night. I recognized the voice, yes. But the weight, the gait, they didn't match. So I thought, either I'm wrong, or he's doing it on purpose. Playing with what I can hear. Wolfe's jaw tightened. Exploiting your blindness. Yes, she whispered. I wasn't just afraid of the killer. I was afraid of the idea that sound, my one certainty, could be turned into a weapon against me. That he could make me doubt myself forever. I glanced at Wolfe. His eyes were closed, but his face was set. Miss Vance, he said, whatever manipulation he attempted, he failed tonight. You heard enough. You remembered enough. And soon, I assure you, he will find that his cleverness has betrayed him. She nodded, but her hands still shook. Tomorrow, Wolfe added, I will invite our remaining friends back here. And this time, Miss Vance, you will not have to name him. She swallowed. You mean, you already know? He opened his eyes and met mine. I know enough. The rest will be confirmed when we arrange the proper conditions. Another trap? I asked. Not another, he said. The last. He leaned back, reached for his beer, and closed his eyes. The orchid scent drifted down. Outside, the city prowled and muttered. Somewhere out there, a man with a metal click in his pocket and murder in his heart was getting ready for his final performance. And Nero Wolfe, planted in his oversized chair, was already selling tickets. Chapter 8, Wolfe's Final Word. There are certain rituals in life you shouldn't disturb. Sunrise over Manhattan, Fritz's strudel cooling on the counter, and Nero Wolfe preparing for a full-scale intellectual ambush. The morning after the attack on Miss Vance, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms at 11 sharp, wearing the expression of an emperor about to conquer a particularly disagreeable province. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. Archie, he said, today we finish this. Finish? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Not solve. Pfui, he muttered. To solve is a consequence. To finish is an act of will. That told me two things. Wolfe was in a mood that required Fritz to hide the brandy. Someone was about to be very unhappy in our office. Whom are we inviting to this little barn dance? I asked. Everyone, he said. Mrs. Halton. The butler Whittier. The staff. Inspector Kramer, regrettably. And Miss Vance, of course. And the short fellow with the clicky toy? I asked. Wolfe grunted. He will come. He must. That was comforting in the same way as being handed a match in a room full of fireworks. The guests arrive. By 4 o'clock, the office was filled with people who didn't want to be there for reasons that varied from legal jeopardy to indigestion. Mrs. Halton arrived first, dripping perfume and disdain. Her mink coat looked like it resented being worn by her. The butler Whittier entered next, pale and trembling, as though the universe were a stern headmistress waiting to expel him. The staff trickled in, each looking like they'd rather be working overtime scrubbing ovens. Kramer stormed in last, coat unbuttoned, cigar unlit but itching for ignition. He looked at Wolfe like he expected him to announce the apocalypse. Miss Vance sat quietly in the red leather chair, her cane across her lap, her face composed but tense. Everyone was present except the one person we needed. Archie, Wolfe said in a soft rumble. Right. I stepped outside. The man was already there. Shorter than me, stocky, brim low, shoulders set. Exactly as I remembered from the stairwell and the alley. His hand twitched near his coat pocket, toward that little device that made the metallic click. Goodwin, he greeted me. Without warmth. Without surprise. You're late, I said. Wolfe hates tardiness. I'm here, he muttered. Let's get it over with. I escorted him in, closing the door behind him. Wolfe glanced up at the newcomer with the faintest flicker of satisfaction, a predator acknowledging prey that had walked willingly into the trap. The speech no one asked for. Thank you, Wolfe began, for attending my gathering. Mrs. Halton scoffed. Spare us the theatrics, Mr. Wolfe. No, Wolfe said, the theatrics are essential. Without them, you would all lie to me. Kramer grumbled, Wolfe, for God's sake. Inspector, Wolfe said sharply, silence. To my amazement, Kramer actually obeyed. Wolfe folded his hands over his stomach, the universal sign that the universe might want to brace itself. Horace Halton, he said, was killed by a man who attempted to obscure his identity not by disguising his face, Miss Vance cannot see one, but by manipulating sound. The room tensed. I saw the short man's jaw tighten. Mrs. Halton shifted in her chair. Miles, still missing, remained the ghost haunting us. Wolfe continued. The killer believed that by imitating another man's voice, another man's cadence, and by creating specific auditory distractions, he could mislead our only witness. Miss Vance's face paled. Kramer leaned forward. But, Wolfe said, sound has texture. It has depth. It reveals weight, height, gait, confidence. Miss Vance could tell what he attempted to hide. She knew the voice was familiar, yet the body that carried it was wrong. He glanced at her. She trembled. The short man shifted closer to the door. I stepped casually between him and freedom. Wolfe inhaled deeply. The killer's mistake was repetition. He used the same device, producing a sharp metallic click, 3 times. Once in the study. Once in the alley. And once last night on the staircase. Mrs. Halton's eyebrow arched. Whittier's mouth fell open. Kramer's cigar dropped from his fingers. And now, Wolfe said with finality, I require only one thing, for the killer to make that sound again. The short man stiffened. That is not necessary, he snapped. Oh, but it is, Wolfe said. For confirmation. The snap of doom. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, slowly, the man reached into his coat. I tensed. Kramer reached for his cuffs. Miss Vance clutched her cane. Wolfe didn't twitch. The man withdrew a small metal case. Square. Heavy. Hinged. A card case. A match holder? A compact recorder? He snapped it shut. Click. Miss Vance gasped. Her whole body jolted with recognition. That's it, she whispered. That's the sound. Kramer lunged. You. The man bolted. But he wasn't ready for Archie Goodwin, Trackstar edition. I blocked him, twisted his wrist, and pinned him against the bookshelf. The metal case clattered to the floor. Kramer was there half a second later with cuffs and the triumphant snarl of a man whose day had suddenly improved. The room erupted into noise, accusations, shock, Mrs. Halton's outraged shrieking, the butler's audible praying. Wolfe lifted a hand. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. The final word, but not the solution. The man, Wolfe said calmly, has now provided the final demonstration necessary. Kramer growled, so you're ready to name him? Wolfe shook his head once. No. The room froze. Kramer sputtered. No. Wolfe, we have him. Pfui, Wolfe said. You have a man. But not the full truth. Not yet. The motive, Inspector, the motive, is the essence. And until I have it entirely, I will not announce the name. Mrs. Halton shrieked, this is madness. Wolfe glared. Madam, sit. She sat. Kramer glared at me. Goodwin, if he doesn't explain. He won't, I said. Not yet. Miss Vance reached for Wolfe's voice. Mr. Wolfe, does this mean? It means, Wolfe said gently, that I know what happened. I know who killed your employer. And I know why. The killer clenched his jaw but said nothing. His eyes glowed with a kind of poisonous certainty. But, Wolfe said, you will hear the full explanation tomorrow morning, at 10 o'clock. Everyone erupted again. Kramer roared, Wolfe, you are not dragging this out another day. I am, Wolfe said. Because I require one more element to be verified. And because Archie will retrieve it for me tonight. I blinked. I will. Yes, Wolfe said calmly. And you will not dally. He gestured toward the door. Miss Vance touched my hand as I passed. Be careful, Mr. Goodwin. I tipped my hat. Always. Outside, the night had teeth. New York glowed with danger and secrets. Wolfe had the killer. But not the whole truth. Not yet. Tomorrow, he would close the case. Tonight, it was my turn to chase the last missing piece.